I think we're at a really interesting stage of education at the moment, and AI is the thing that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. How does that impact education? How's that going to change things going forward? And there's still that real sort of settling ground within the AI world, of course, whether it's ChatGTP and how much it's evolved in the last 2 to 3 years. I think as a school, you've got to really start thinking about what are we going to do in terms of evolving our education to ensure that students are still learning effectively and building the skills for the future, whilst also accepting that the days of essay writing and dissertations is probably over. We might see writing replicated, we might see lots of tasks automated, but that ability to go and interview and shake someone's hand and sit in a room and get a job, that's not changing.
So welcome to the podcast, listeners. Today we're joined by Dr. Adam Greenwood, Head of Schools at Annunciation Day School in Atlanta. Dr. Greenwood's path has been anything but conventional, starting in the British Army, moving into school leadership in London, and now leading a diverse independent school in the US. Since 2022, he's helped ADS grow its community of 21 nationalities, raised more than $3 million for new facilities, and continued to ground the school in its ethos, centered in Christ, children, and community. His story offers a powerful lesson in patience, culture, and innovation in K2 leadership. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Greenwood. How are you doing today?
I'm good. No, great to be with you, and always enjoy talking about education.
Love it. Perfect. Okay. So I think I'm going to start with asking you about your journey a little. So your journey has taken you from the British Army to headship roles in London and now to leading an Annunciation School in Atlanta. How has that blend of military discipline, international experience, and faith-based leadership shaped the way that you think about running schools currently?
Well, I think it's been a really interesting journey for me. I think I've had a sort of less conventional career, started in the military, and then became a head quite quickly after joining education, started in the public sector, so had the experience of working in London public schools, and then transitioned over to private education. And that's where I started to sort of really build my foundation of becoming a head. And, unlike a lot of teachers, I went into education with the idea of being ahead. The things that attracted me to the military leadership, the chance to sort of enhance and work with people. You see that sort of parallel in education, albeit you're working with teachers and students and parents versus soldiers. And of course, had my first headship and then moved to the USA 3 years ago. So, having, I think, that blend of experience is really useful when it comes to, understanding different education systems and really just building your own perspectives over time. There's some great things, obviously, in the UK education system. And I think we do have one of the best education systems in the world in the UK. But the US as well does some really unique things that you don't see happening back home, which, I think over time will just give me a really sort of blended experience. And I think as a leader, you always want to grow. You always want to learn and, be the best head you can be over your career. I've probably still got another 20 years to go before I get close to retirement. So there's lots I can still do.
You said something about there being parallels between soldiers and students and school leaderships. That was really interesting. Tell me more.
Well, I think, what it all comes down to with people is relationships. You've got to build relationships with those people, and you're always going to struggle to lead people if they don't like you. And I don't mean that in the sense of you've got to be friends with everyone and everyone's got to love you, but there's got to be a relationship built on trust, and there's got to be relationships built on whether it's a soldier, a student, a teacher, a parent, believing you're interested in them. Believing you want to know more about them. And, on a small level, that's with my students knowing what American football team they support. And then when they walk in the morning being like, oh, great win for the Eagles today. Great win for the Falcons yesterday. So that's how you build that trust, I think, really, with individuals. And, of course, there's a big age difference between a soldier and a student. But at the same time, parents are a big part of the relationship when you're the head. Ultimately, probably as much as the students. So it's all about finding that balance and just showing you care.
Love that. I mean, that's a very new perspective that I got. Love it. Okay. So you said once that leading change in schools is like turning an oil tanker that's slow and careful. Can you share an example where patience paid off in leadership versus where there was a time where speed was the better choice?
I mean, this is my favorite analogy in education, and I probably say it, once, twice a week, particularly to my sort of team here. I magpied that idea off someone else back on my MBA program, but I think that image of the oil tanker. If you move too quickly, you've got a disaster on your hands. It spills, but if you move too slowly, you don't get anywhere. So you've got to be very cognizant of that. I think moving slowly pays off with you want to have a solid strategic plan as the leader of the school. 3 to 5 years. I personally think a 3-year plan works well because you can see those achievable steps. I've tried 5-year plans and it just seems a bit too far into the future to see what progress you're going to make. But I think, the mistake you can fall into, and I've fallen into this at times, is you try and change too much and the environment can't handle that level of change. And in particular, you've got to be so careful of not burning your teachers out and not throwing too many ideas out there. So I think that slow approach of your strategic plan and knowing this is what we're going to try and achieve each semester. This is how it sort of steps into the future, is absolutely critical. But yeah, sometimes you have to move quickly, and the things that really you do move quickly on are often issues around student well-being, student happiness, any issues that might arise within your parent body. Sometimes they do need that sort of instant reply and that instant communication. Even this morning, had a long email from a parent. I knew that needed to be dealt with, and it was a response of let's meet, as soon as possible. Let's talk this over. Let's not get into the weeds on the email, but let's have a conversation. And I think that keeps that trust, keeps that connection there with people.
Makes sense. I think from what I'm hearing is just we need to know the right balance to just kind of figure it out. Like that makes sense. Okay.
Yeah.
As the head of school, your accountability is to the board and a faith of community and not to the taxpayers and like public systems. So how does that change the leadership pressures that you have to face?
I think it's a really interesting thing in schools. I don't think you necessarily see many other environments like this where you're managing so many different stakeholders that are quite different. Because on one level I'm working with 2-year-olds who come into my preschool. On another level, I'm working with parents who can be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s. I've got that breadth level of parent in my body. I've got teachers who range vastly in age as well, from Gen Zers who are in their 20s right through to teachers in their 60s who are very experienced. I'm then also managing the parishioners within my environment, and also I think the community. As a private school, you are very much representing your community in your area. So I think you've got to make sure you're building that trust early. And that first year is ahead. I've been the head of 2 schools now. The first year is a baptism of fire, and people are looking to see, can you be trusted? What's my connection? What's my relationship with you? And I think after a year or two, you get that in place. And I certainly see that now in year 4 at this school. But you do have to make sure you're constantly getting those touch points with people, and whether that's been down at the soccer game and on the side of the field chatting to parents and saying good morning to students, or whether that's being out in the local community and realizing that when you go to the grocery store, you are still the head, and you might bump into your students and they'll want to chat. And some people don't want to live near their school. I live 2 minutes away from my school, and I love that. But everyone finds their balance. I think it is sort of different in different schools, and certainly if you're accountable to the taxpayer, you're having your budget managed on a different level. But for us, we're accountable directly to the parent. They're paying to come to the private school, and they ultimately expect to have a happy child and one that's educated.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, perfect. So Annunciation Day School is unique with a student body that's 30% Orthodox Christian and 70% of like other faiths. Your philosophy that is centered in Christ, children, and community. How do you, as a leader, balance the need to have a strong Christian mission while ensuring that other diverse groups from other families that are just 21 plus nationalities that you have, various faiths, how do they also feel truly seen and valued at the same time?
I mean, we have got a phenomenally unique culture here at ADS. We've got 29 nationalities now in the school, so a huge amount of diversity. I think we're one of the most diverse schools, certainly in Atlanta. And for me, that was a huge attraction to the school. When you're looking for a school, you're looking for a place, obviously, to work, and you hope you get a job offer. But I've got 3 children at this school, so I've also got that investment. And I was, looking at the school through the lens of someone coming from overseas, looking for a place for my students. I think, the Christian culture here is absolutely fantastic, and a way we want to obviously, have our children grow up in sort of Christ's vision. Of course, as the head, you've got to be a Christian yourself. I didn't grow up in the Orthodox faith. I grew up in the Church of England, which is probably no surprise as a Brit. And I've worked at 3 Church of England schools. But, the Orthodox faith here, I think, is something that binds everyone together, and there's that sort of shared vision of faith here. But I've been reflecting a lot lately, like what sort of binds the school as this international community, and I think it can be best described as Atlanta is what binds us. Atlanta's a very diverse city. It's one of the most diverse cities in the United States of America, and we've all come from all over the world, whether it's the UK, Australia, China, Venezuela, Argentina, Romania, Germany, France. We've got a huge range of people. They're bound together by this city and this place that it is. And for students, it's a really unique experience because they learn American history, they learn Georgia history, whilst also drawing in those unique experiences from other nations. My daughter's best friend is from Ethiopia. She doesn't know a great deal about Ethiopia until she found herself in this environment and discusses that with her friends. At the same time, her friends probably didn't know a lot about British history and, I don't know, Henry VIII and Queen Victoria. It just becomes this sort of really unique melting pot. And, I think having that vision of centered in Christ, children, community, keeps that in the front of everyone's minds. But, this unique melting pot is just a wonderful place to be.
I mean, I think children also learn from each other about different cultures. So I think that's also a very nice perspective to have, right, when you're in the education system. Love that. Okay. You have successfully led the Field of Dreams Gala, raising over $3.2 million. Most schools leaders struggle to raise a fraction of that amount. So what is the biggest secret that you've learned about building that kind of trust and community that leads to that level of philanthropy?
I mean, this has been such a unique experience coming to America and the culture of giving. It's so different to the UK. I mean, in the UK, the idea of raising money for the school and having big dinner nights and things, it's just not really there within the culture. I think parents feel much more in the UK. I'm paying my tuition. We should be building these things and doing these things. The United States definitely has much more of a culture of that. But yeah, I mean, that first fundraiser, $3.2 million, I mean, that was no insignificant amount to raise. I mean, I was thrilled at the end of the night. I think my jaw pretty much touched the floor. I mean, the secret to it, I suppose, is twofold. One, does your parent body, your community have the capacity to give that money? I think, people are naturally generous, and if people have the money to give, they'll give it. But, these huge sums of money are just simply not available to everyone. So it is unique to your culture. And I think as a school, you've got to have some level of analysis on what is a realistic target. There's no point setting huge targets that you're not going to meet. So once you've kind of done that analysis, you can have some perspective on what we're realistically going to get. But, back to my earlier point, it comes back to relationships. People aren't just going to give the money because you've asked for it. People want to have a relationship with you, and you've got to harness those relationships. And that's the complexity of leading a school, because those relationships are with the parents, with the teachers, with the wider community and the parishioners in the case of a faith school. And, that involves going to events and speaking to people and going out for lunches and just sort of, building your vision into those individuals and seeing if they're interested in what's going to be harnessed here on the campus, and they want to be part of that. And if they do, and they have the money to give, people will. And we've managed to build what I think really is probably one of the best soccer facilities in central Atlanta. We've got this amazing field. I would love to host a World Cup team here. Atlanta will host 8 games in the World Cup. We've got a facility we could genuinely host a team at. So for a school of our size and a school in our sort of central area, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's really impressive. And I think from what I'm hearing is a lot of relationship building is needed, whether it's in terms of taking care of your teachers or just having a good relationship with the parents. Makes a lot of sense. Okay. So when you think about an effective academic model, what is the one thing that is non-negotiable? Is it a small class size? Is it teacher quality? Is it parent partnership? Or is it something totally different?
I think, it's interesting, these sort of, ideas of how to run schools have kind of been building over the years, and there's always sort of lots of trends that come in and out. And I think people are often sort of looking for what's the silver bullet, what's the one solution that'll change things for me. I think actually you just need to take a bit more of a traditional view often with things. And for me, it's about having really high expectations for the students. I think high expectations is the one non-negotiable, that if you do that and believe in the students and really encourage them and push them to be the very best they can be, that's going to bring you success. And again, it sort of comes down to knowing your community and knowing your student body. But we can all think back to when we were at school and we had those teachers that really encouraged us and really sort of built that confidence and faith in us. And you flourished in their lessons. You did really well and you did better than you expected. But, sadly, I think a lot of us probably also have those teachers we think back on and they didn't believe in us. And I remember my sort of results day in England, getting my GCSEs, and my French teacher was like, "Oh, well, I'm so shocked you got this GCSE grade, Adam." I just thought, it made me feel so terrible. I was like, "Wow, I worked really hard, but this teacher has never believed in me." Balance that against an English teacher I had who just was so encouraging, and it is still a teacher I think back on as an amazing educator. It brought me a much further along my journey than I'd have ever been. So we talk to our teachers all the time about just high expectations for these students, getting the very best out of them, giving each of them the opportunity. Our theme for this year is giving every child the chance to shine. So we've got T-shirts with it on, we've got logos, we've got stickers. Every child has that chance to shine, and I think it's amazing. They kind of feel that, and they believe. They know we believe in them, and that's what what is unique about a small private school culture. I think is that belief and that knowing of every child.
Definitely. I think when the child knows that their teachers or their parents believe in them, I think that makes a very large difference. Okay, perfect. Looking ahead, where do you think independent schools like yours need to innovate the most to stay relevant in terms of curriculum design, faculty development, or is it student engagement?
I think we're at a really interesting stage of education at the moment, and AI is the thing that's on the tip of everyone's tongue. How does that impact education? How's that going to change things going forward? And there's still that real sort of settling ground within the AI world, of course, whether it's ChatGTP and how much it's evolved in the last 2 to 3 years. I think as a school, you've got to really start thinking about what are we going to do in terms of evolving our education to ensure that students are still learning effectively and building the skills for the future, whilst also accepting that the days of essay writing and dissertations is probably over. How much longer are we going to try and beat these models that you can input your own writing into and they can replicate? So I think as a school, for me, we're putting a big emphasis on oracy skills. Students being able to stand up and speak confidently in front of large groups of people and adults. So we might see writing replicated, we might see lots of tasks automated, but that ability to go and interview and shake someone's hand and sit in a room and get a job, that's not changing. I was reading in the New York Times just this morning how we're at the biggest graduate sort of employment crisis rate they've seen in a generation. So getting those soft skills in place is critical. So from children being in the pre-K 4 class, so 4-year-old students stand up in assembly in front of the whole school and parents and present. And every class presents a couple times a year, and that runs all the way through the school, 4-year-olds through to our 14-year-olds. And we have public speaking competitions for them. We have all these things in place. To ensure that confidence is built in. And we then balance that off with leadership opportunities. So these students are building their leadership credentials through the house system, through the student council. And we give every student from 5th grade upwards the chance to have a leadership position. And that's their first experience of leadership. And that's what we're trying to balance against AI. Where does that work? And in one sense, you've got schools that are becoming very AI centered, online, using platforms all the time. The other side is I think we're seeing almost a rebellion in that classical education is becoming more popular in a lot of schools. And I've seen it in Atlanta where they don't have Promethean boards anymore. No one has laptops, and it's gone back to that old school kind of education. Gone are the days where 5 years ago, having a class set of iPads was amazing. Oh, you've got all these iPads and all this tech in your class. Parents loved it, and it was an easy win as the head. But now parents are very cautious walking around. They want to see, how much are the children on devices? How much are they looking at this Promethean board in the day? What's the use of technology? They're very, very cautious. And as a parent body and as the head, you've got to react to that and balance it.
So that makes a lot of sense. But tell me, what do you think particularly about AI in terms of are you sort of like, what are your views about AI and the integration of AI in the student life?
I mean, for me, I've recently launched an AI-driven website platform, which is for lesson planning, teachersassistant.com. And this is a lesson planning platform that allows you to input what subject you want to teach, what country you're teaching it in, what grade it's for, any learning objectives, and that will create a lesson for you in 30 seconds. And this is a project I've been working on for about a year with a close coding friend of mine. So for me, my view on AI is about saving time. This platform I've launched will probably save teachers, particularly if you're an early year teacher, maybe 10 hours a week of lesson planning, because it creates a lesson that you can adapt for your class in your setting without having to make things from scratch. So those things will be amazing. Some of these things that we can implement into classrooms will save the teacher time so they can spend more time on relationships with their students, spend more time being the subject matter expert, reading. I was a geography teacher in the classroom, reading up on geography, reading up on history, and ensuring they can tailor things for each and every student. So I think those kind of things where we save time to really get back to focusing on what are the important things. I mean, how much longer are we going to be marking exam papers by hand, particularly in systems like the UK, where there's 500,000 students taking GCSEs? Freeing up that time for teachers is going to make a big difference in how they can approach it and really lead to less teacher burnout. We're in a crisis, I think, of education recruitment right now. Teachers aren't sort of flooding into the profession. Young Gen Zers don't want to be teachers. But how can we make it more appealing? Well, let's get back to what's really fun about education. It's the student, and it's being a subject matter expert.
So you specialize in communications and tech from your military background. And you see that AI is sort of reshaping the way leaders manage school. So whether it's operations, parent communication, or enrollment hosting, how do you think it's taking over, or what are your views on that?
I mean, I think, for me, it was quite a unique experience being a technology expert in the military. I think I've got quite a deep understanding of how these technologies work. I served out in Afghanistan, and my sort of primary role was managing the communication systems within Southern Helmand Province. And then I used to consult for a company called Sentry Tech, which were one of the really early AI adopters. And this was almost a decade ago. So they were very ahead of the game. So it was interesting to kind of see how education was evolving at an early level. I think the key will be it can help us solve really complicated problems. There are things that we have that need a lot of time and effort that AI will streamline. One of the things in Atlanta that's becoming quite popular at the moment is private schools having very bespoke bus routes. So how do you expand your catchment in a city that has no public transport, really? Well, you think about having very well-designed bus routes to pick students up across the city, albeit there's a real traffic problem. Well, AI is great at helping to design those routes in the most efficient and effective manner. You try and do that by hand, and it can take you, it can be a full-time job. So those things streamline and will be useful. I also think in terms of marketing and recruitment, the bread and butter of being a private school remains you've got to get students in your school. We're seeing private schools close at a record rate, whilst also other private schools flourishing. And I think it's understanding what are realistic levels of students to get into your school. So AI can help with things like, well, what is the population structure and makeup like in my area? I mean, how many children are there? How many schools am I competing against? What does that population pyramid look like? I remember one year in London, we had a little dip in recruitment in one of our grades. And we had a marketing company sort of come in and look at it. And they were like, well, there's 200,000 less children born in this year than have been born in previous years. There's literally less children available right now. So you're competing harder against the local private schools for these kids. So you've got to understand that, I think, and AI will help with all those things, albeit everyone's got the same tools. There's over 200 private schools in Atlanta and a very robust public system. So how you stay ahead of that and ahead of the competition, it comes down to building your own unique brand. What's your brand and what attracts people?
Okay. But tell me, do you have any guardrails for responsible AI use by teachers or students? Or where do you think AI genuinely enhances learning, or are there places that you even discourage it at times?
I think certainly with writing, with students, we still want them to be fluent writers. So I think you've got to just be very careful about how you set work now, whether it's essays or extended projects. If students are going home to do an essay, you've got to accept that they probably are going to either use AI or write their own work and then put it through an AI generator to spell check and grammar check. So it's balancing off what you're trying to achieve as a teacher. Are you trying to build in skills? Are you trying to build in knowledge? And I think as the teacher putting those parameters in place, I think with essays, we're moving certainly in my school more towards students doing them in class.
Okay.
Doing them at home, research-based things at home, you can see the value in that. And often research can take up a lot of time and more time than's available in class. Whereas, writing essays, planning essays in the class, you can then help and monitor and give live feedback to the students. But AI and the change to how we write is the big thing. Albeit with students, I mean, it's pretty obvious when they've used AI. So there's still that benefit, but those things will change over time, I'm sure.
One last question. So if I were to give you a magic AI tool tomorrow, what is one problem that you'd like to solve with it?
I mean, that's a big question. What's the sort of magic wand? I think for me, the critical thing in schools is still communication. Communication is very key. And parents get a lot of emails and a lot of things flying their way, whether it's through your school app, whether it's through social media. You've got your parent reps, you've got the teacher. I would love a really powerful AI tool that could just succinctly in one page give the parent everything they need to know right there and then, tailored to their child. We've got this homework task you need to complete by Thursday. We've got a soccer game on Friday at 4:00. We've got a fundraiser coming up. Click here to pay the outstanding tuition fee balance. Click here to buy the uniform you need because your child is about to grow out of their trousers. And click here to find someone who you can carpool with. something like that. I'm seeing now with apps, we've got an app for our school, but we're about to launch a new one that's built on much sort of more powerful technology. But nothing is still at that level of communication. You're still navigating, for me, three children who are all in three separate parts of the school. So what's going on in the preschool? What's going on in fifth grade? What are these events we're going to? And you could draw that all in together, it'd be amazing. And how parents do it when they have children at multiple schools, I don't know. I've got friends with children at three schools, and balancing those calendars and everything that's going off must be a nightmare. So if anyone can design the ultimate communication tool for schools, I think they'll make a lot of money.
I love that idea. I mean, it's a very innovative but useful idea. I love that. Okay. So that were all the questions that I had from my side. We have this little segment where we ask the leader of the previous podcast to give a question for the one that we're doing right now. So the question that has come up for you is that if you could change one thing about the education system, what would it be?
Change one thing about the education system. Wow. Now that is a bold question. I think, one of the really unique things I found coming to America is the difference between the inspection system here in America versus the UK. I think in the UK, as a head, you feel a lot of pressure around Ofsted or the independent school inspectorate. You sort of live or die by the grading you get as a school. As a private school in London, we needed to be inspected and get excellent across the board, or that's going to be plastered for 6 years on the school website or online as a deficiency in our school if we don't get that top category. And that, I think, puts a lot of pressure on you. And I think as a head, leads you to get into a lot of the bureaucracy of the system. So I think the UK is absolutely weighed down by red tape in a way that I've actually found quite sort of freeing over here in America. And that's not to say that things aren't regulated, but I think there is a system where we look much more at what is sensible and what is needed. And they've changed the Ofsted inspection process in the UK now, but it's still incredibly critical. And I think here, where we have what's called an accreditation system, it works much better. So you're either accredited or you're not. You're either a great school or you've got a lot of deficiencies to work on. And I think that for me allows you to lead the school in the best manner possible, make a wider range of decisions that can be bespoke to your school and your culture. And those cultures are often very unique. And as a leader of a Greek Orthodox school, I can tell you it's more unique than most will find. There's only 3 other accredited Orthodox schools in the United States of America. So we are a niche market here. But, back in the UK, there'd be a lot of things, I think, around the legislation that would, perhaps restrict that unique culture and restrict you allowing to do that. And I know it's the same in other countries. I know in places like the UAE, they're inspected by the government every year. There's differences in inspection regimes. But for me, it would be, moving towards, as a school, you're either good or you're not good yet. Mm-hmm. And having guidance then on how to become a good school and having a process in place that allows that school to then change things and ensure they're as effective as they can be. As a educator in the UK, I was chair of a school board of actually one of the sort of most successful grammar schools in the UK, and we got Ofsted inspected whilst I was the chair of that school, and it just felt very, very sort of critical from people coming into the school for 3 days and trying to understand the culture, and that that was hard, I think, for people to understand it within the context of large all-girls selective grammar school in a very sort of diverse part of London, where some people phenomenally wealthy, other people very much sort of in poverty really and struggling to make ends meet, but thrown together in the same school because of their academic ability. And if you're coming from a different part of the country to see that, you don't necessarily understand it, but you then get a sweeping statement put on your school. Changes to the inspection system, I think, would make a huge difference to education.
Makes sense. Okay. So I think I learned a lot today, especially about how important relationships are to run our school holistically. So I think our listeners will also have a lot of fun listening to this podcast. So yeah, it was amazing having you today, and we'll be in touch. Thank you so much.